Hi, how you doing? This is Joey Natolo with Space Between. I'm here with Brando Colonna. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
We are introduced by a dear friend, by Paula, but our last conversation got pretty interesting. But um, I really want to talk about your whole experience. I think that your experience is so similar to, it's funny, I never thought I'd be doing a podcast, honestly. And I didn't know if I'd be good or bad at it or whatever it was. So I just kind of, as I was going, I just kept going. But and here we are. But ultimately, going through and understanding the stories and hearing different people's experiences and I'm not going to say it's made me more, going deeper into a rabbit hole, more interested in wanting to know more and seeking. It really is what it is. This platform has led me to want to seek further into spirituality and understanding that experience through other people. And in the beginning, I didn't understand that because I was really fully in a wide open awakening and acting crazy, which I know you know a lot about.
I do. No, I do. I know a lot about being crazy.
Well, so tell us about, I want to hear about your story, but they're very parallel. Stories are very similar and I just love the way you expressed it in your humor. I think that the humor is the key, because a lot of times when people are having these breakdowns versus breakthroughs, it's the humor that will pull you through the other side.
Yeah, humor is interesting when it comes to spirituality because humor has judgment attached to it because you have to form an opinion. Humor also has a misdirect, which is taking you away from your focus, and what you need with stable spirituality is attention. So for me as a comedian, being funny and being irreverent was always distracting me from my sole purpose, but I didn't realize it. And then I also had an unexpected awakening, like you're talking about, in a funny framework of being insane. And I found concentration, I found a higher vibration, and it didn't work well with misdirects and judgment. And so not only, and there's a bipolar aspect of it, so not only was I going like this mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, but then the way I was thinking in being funny and being judgmental, it was consistently taking me out of a sense of peace that I found with concentration.
And you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder at what age?
That's an interesting question because I was diagnosed, but when did I start believing it?
Right? Yeah.
So I
they
think
started saying it, or you because I think they said I was bipolar, and then I think I just thought I could get free drugs at a certain age, so I'd say I'm bipolar, I think I need this, and this. So
that got me in the hospital. That exact perspective got me in the hospital.
Okay, so really?
Yeah. So wait, where do you want me to go from? We have so much to talk about.
Go from, well, it's interesting. Go from the hospital and the whole thing of being a comedian and how it happened to you on your path, it's right where you think it just crossed. You everything that you probably wanted and looked for in life was like right there, and then all of a sudden it deviated because you had an awakening, and the things that were once important to you became less important.
Yeah, I think you too. I had an accidental awakening. Mine was a joke. I thought it would be funny I had just gotten divorced, and that was a shattering of an assumption in itself, right? So now my mind was working differently. And again, the bipolar thing, it's my belief and understanding that when you're manic, it's a shattering of multiple assumptions at the same time, which is why it's so hard to deal with mentally, and even the vibrations of it, because you're shattering fast. So I didn't know that I had that ability, and I had a big shattering of an assumption that I was going to stay with a husband, and that wasn't true. And so I was kind of ripe and ready for a spiritual awakening, even though I didn't know. So as far as my stand-up career is concerned, I did okay. I was just getting into the clubs, and that was really exciting for me. I performed in Mexico, and I got like second place
in Mexico.
In Mexico, in Cabo San Lucas, there was a comedy festival, and I went down there, got second place, and that was real great. So for me, I felt like I was, onwards and upwards.
So, but the funny thing is you got to really think about this, is having an awakening at the backdrop of
Mexico?
No, comedy, like even like a comedy play, any of those comedy tours, or what do you call them? when people go perform a comedy performance.
Oh,
They're just
yeah.
the backstage of how they are, and they're just really interesting. And people kind of working. It's just a different. It's like being a musician. You know, being a comedian is a whole nother world. And then having awakening on top of it.
Yeah.
That just to me is just like fucking whole nother level.
It is, because there's a lot of negativity in comedy. Even in the comedy clubs, it's like thick with negative vibration. And that was part of me going insane and not being able to go back to work. So I had this upward rising that I felt like I was going to do well. But I was very tired because a year after, I had to go back on stage a week after I got passed. And it was I got divorced a week before. No, I got divorced a week after I got passed. So I only had a week to recover from my divorce before I had to get on stage. And that was really difficult because I was so hurt and in so much pain. And I was already very raw and upfront with my narrative and my stand-up. So a year of that and pitching shows, I was tired and I needed to take a break. So I went off the grid for the most part, and I decided to write a pilot about Jesus being reincarnated as a female comedian, which was me, and then I was going to go find apostles on Tinder, and this was the idea. And so, I know, it's funny. My manager thought it was brilliant, and I was like, yeah, it's going to be great, and it's going to...
What led you exactly to that point, that creative, what you just said?
Because my act was about having mental illness and believing they were a superpower, and I just wasn't using them correctly.
Well, that's important. Yeah, that's all I'm doing. Yeah.
Right? And so, people would say, oh, you have ADD, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, but maybe I just don't care about what you're saying. Maybe I don't want to pay attention to you, and you call this ADD, but I could concentrate over here, like these types of things. So I thought, all right, so let's take that full throttle. And I don't know. I had heard or read somewhere that the story of Jesus is the same as Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker and Neo, and those stories always work. So I was like, great, I'll do a story that always works for me in my act, but let's just go to the top of the food chain and make him Jesus. And so that's...
It's interesting, though, if you even think about the stories, it's really the hero's journey. Because if you think about Jesus and Superman, like people be like, no. I go, really? Go look at them, because they're all very similar. It's that hero's journey, So they're very similar.
Yeah, now I look back and I think there's only one narrative, which is finding God, and the details are in the clothes we're wearing and the choices we make, and how many times we have to go through it to, succeed. So now looking back, I go, of course, that's why I did that. But also that's why it was chaotic, because I wasn't seeking a spiritual awakening. To me, the whole thing was a joke. It was a joke. It was going to be the pilot was very trippy. Joke was on you. Yeah, the joke was definitely on me. The joke was on me. And the stars are still laughing.
But that's how it is. It has a funny way of presenting itself. Oh. You're a comedian, right? So it plays right into your whole story in a funny way.
It did.
Scary, but funny.
It was scary. So I thought the idea was to have it be real trippy and have it be like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And then I wanted it to be real irreverent and stupid, because that's what my comedy was like. And so I wanted to be like Eastbound and Down and put those worlds together. And my manager was like, it's great, so funny, let's do it. And I was like, yeah, and I'm going to go act this out in an alter ego and really believe it and have people really believe that I went insane and believe I'm Jesus. And she was like, that's brilliant. I was like, yeah, and we're going to tell the whole comedy community that I'm insane and nobody could know but you. And she was like, brilliant, let's do it. You'll be the Dr. Gonzo. Brilliant. You'll watch me so I don't go too high with the bipolar. Like, everything lined up with this story. And so I, embarked on doing it. And what I didn't realize is that, I was living out the Beatitudes. So I was setting myself up for this spiritual awakening. I was not afraid. My heart was open. I had absolutely no worry. And I was believing that Jesus or Christ consciousness was awakening within me. And I was going out and having other people believe it, because I had this alter ego. So it was just happening. And then I was going home and rewriting it over and over again, that this thing was happening to me. And then next thing I know, I was like,
it happened.
It happened. And
that's so hysterical.
Yeah, it happened. And I mean, not fully, but I had an awakening into a consciousness that was much higher than the one I was used to. And because I was bipolar and going up and down, that's why it was chaotic for me, because I couldn't hold on to the information and act cool. So I would be really high, I would get high level information or have high level understanding, and then come back down, see that high level of understanding, but in chaos and the reverse, and that was scary. So I'd want to go back up to see it with purity. So I was constantly doing this.
Right. I think that that's part of, that's normal though. I think that we're taught to think that that should be strange, but I think that's it. You're going through the changes, and anything changing, if a car changes gears or anything changes, you're going to feel that change in gears. So those highs and lows that they say are bipolar things, I just felt are things are told, but you were just having a spiritual kind of awakening, which is a change in your system, and those things will start to change. Hey, Toby.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and when we talk, and I enjoy how much we talk, because we are on the same page with everything that we say, we just have a different vernacular.
Right.
For me, I would have preferred to have had a certain amount of stability mentally so that I could have cruised there longer. And then I could have gotten stronger, stable here with that information so that when I came down, I could apply it in my everyday world. And then come back up, learn, stay, and then come back down, just slower and longer. If I would have had that, I don't think I would have had the amount of chaos that I had in my life from that point up until a few years ago. And I've made some decisions based off of that, like that looking back, I would have made differently. And so for me, those are just my preferences. But I also understand it's coming up and coming down. It's like you can't see light unless you understand that darkness is there in relation, and then you realize, oh, this is better. This
Right.
is light. I want to be in this space, not in the dark space.
Yeah. I don't think that, when these things happen, like from my experience, when they happen, I don't think they happen in it's to rock you from your center, from your core, so that you see how you get up. I think that's why they always say people find things, when it's a near-death experience, or for you were probably going, being divorced, and that's a huge change and shift in your life. I had mine. I was being separated from my family, 21 years, going through separation, a lot of other things happening. But and then to throw that on top of it, and then you're being looked at like you're actually losing your mind. That's the thing is with society is I think that the way it looks at people that are actually having awakenings are actually having a sickness. So it's frowned upon in a way, if you really look at it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying too about you see things differently. It's I don't know if this is for spiritual awakenings as a whole. This is just for me, but I was just seeing through the invisible, if that makes sense, and with understanding. And so you knew everything that was happening within the universe in relation to everything, but nobody else could see it or understand it because, well, at least for me, I didn't have the vernacular. I had no language for what I was going through. But there was times where I was on, because at a certain point, I couldn't go back to work because it was just too crazy. I remember getting up on stage and telling, very irreverent joke and understanding the karmic ramifications of what I'm saying going into an audience of dissociated minds because they just heard about sex and they're looking to escape and they're drinking, and I'm saying this thing that isn't of truth, and I know it's not of truth because I've had the spiritual awakening, but I'm saying it and I'm planting it inside of their minds, and they're going to make choices based off of that, which I usually wouldn't be responsible for, but now that I know I am, and then my karmic ramifications, amplified by the vibration of the mic and the control you have on top of the stage and the sound in 1 second.
No, yeah, but that's
in the middle of
after.
a dick joke.
Totally. But go back to actually understanding, really understanding you're having an awakening and being in a mental institution, and all these things are happening. Like, wow, like this is actually, I've actually put myself now into a situation now and lit myself up, so to speak. I was saying, being lit, being awake. You kind of you've created a situation to light yourself up. By just talking about what you were doing, it kind of woke something up in you, or you remembered something.
Yeah, it was difficult for me because I had set the tone that everyone was going to think I'm insane. I was writing about having a bunch of mental illness, which I didn't really attribute to all of it. I kind of I made it bigger than it seemed to make it funny on stage, but it was a mild bipolar. Getting back to your question, it was a minor bipolar in like my 20s, and I didn't believe it, whether or not it was true or not. I didn't believe it, and I was high level functioning, so I didn't really deal with it. And it didn't get drastic until I really wrote the pilot. And then but I allowed it to get drastic because I was being weird, and I was letting myself become this thing for the sake of the story. So when that opened,
It's funny because right now, if you think about it, I don't mean to cut you off,
okay.
but the bipolar tendency or disorders, like you're saying, started as you wrote the pilot.
It started as I wrote.
Right.
No, it didn't start. It got worse.
Okay, so it just lit up. So it aggravated it.
Yeah.
If you were to say, that's what it is. So basically, really, what you were doing is having an awakening that you created, and it aggravated what you're saying you're identifying with bipolar disorder. So actually, you probably were lighting up, but you're identifying it with bipolar disorder because you just said it. You said it.
Yeah. I understand that as just the spiritual perspective.
Right.
But like when I think about the psychological, because I still think we have psychology, and that still exists in a mind space for people to understand a language and definitions. They could put a name on something that they don't understand. And I was definitely allowing myself to open up my mind and be open to different things and then close it. Like I was purposely dissociating my mind so that I could take in information.
Right.
So whether or not that was happening to me or I was allowing it to happen, I feel like those are the same things. Are we saying the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's almost like saying, like you're saying incoming information that you're getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I think I'm understanding what you're saying.
Maybe I just feel I see this thing happening in 3 parts. Like,
because you're saying about getting like downloads or information, or you trying to understand things that are coming through and what's actually happening to you?
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind of?
No, I'm saying that I understand that these like neurons are, like when somebody is diagnosed as something that's bipolar, it's because the neurons are flashing a lot. They have this capacity to be able to flash neurons and have releases of chemicals, right?
Okay.
Like that really happens. And so maybe people call that flashing thing bipolar because it goes up and it goes down and then it's not stable, it's too much chemicals, it's not enough chemicals, and so this happens. And when this happens in the body, emotions without emotional intelligence get crazy and bad decisions are made, right? But I also think that in those flashings, this is the light that you're talking about because let's say it's like a match, it's going like this and it's lighting you up, and if your mind can expand, boom, spiritual experience.
These things that are happening, getting lit up, this is supposed to happen, but we're trying to define it so that we could fix it, and it's not really the problem. The thing is letting it happen, working through it. So when your body starts having breakdowns, or people having emotional kind of like shit, that's a part of growing up, puberty, like if you really are thinking we're spiritual beings having a human experience, then let's go through those experiences. I feel Western medicine, we just kind of went a whole other way with trying to fix things with like, some kind of antidote always, or prescribe this and we can fix it, prescribe that, we could fix it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I believe that too. I believe that if you could start stabilizing it from a spiritual space first and then narrow down what you need to do, I think that would be helpful, and people not feeling like they're insane. I always feel like even schizophrenia, like when people say, oh, they're schizophrenic, they talk to people. But if you understand spiritually that there's a whole other realm here of beings and light and shadow, or entities, whatever you want to call it, it's got intelligence on it. And if somebody has the ability to go past and see that, then that's a real thing. Now, who they're talking to, what they're talking to, and how they're handling the information, that's also another thing.
Well, that's also based on the way society perceives that, because you say these things in society. Go to the corner here and tell some people that you're talking to Jesus, and they'll be like, "Oh, that dude's tripping."
Yeah.
You don't have to walk in carrying a cross. You just got to go, I'm talking to Jesus, and you now lost it.
Yeah.
You now are in the, So that's what I'm saying is that if you're in a society that doesn't allow a plant to grow, how are you to grow? You know what I mean? We're spiritual beings trying to grow, but we can't in this society, due to the fact of the way that young kids, like if they start having what we're saying, they call it breakdowns. I'm having a break. No, you're about to have a breakthrough. This is actually beautiful. So let's walk you through this.
Yeah.
So they're afraid when you see someone like Kanye West, who on this stage is having a breakdown, openly looks like he's like, and they're telling him he's mentally sick. So think of the words they're saying. So I believe that you have a lot of younger people now looking at this that go, I don't know if that's what I want to happen to me, you know. And he's having something very spiritual happen to this guy, and he's decided, look at him as a spiritual leader that's just got to straighten his shit out.
Yeah.
You know, he's obviously confused, and this is part of what happens. And so I don't want to be told, and nor did you want to be told that you were losing your mind?
For me, I set up the fact that I was losing my mind, and then it started to happen. So it just got scary. So, and I was in isolation, by the way, when this whole thing happened. So I was just afraid that I was losing my mind because I became completely unrelatable with the rest of the world.
No, I believe.
You know, so I didn't have this like, oh, you're crazy circumstance. I was like, oh, I'm crazy. And everybody else was like, oh, yeah, you are.
So same thing happened to my family, because I was able to hide it, right?
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of keep it kind of cool for a minute, but it's very much similar. I was having mood swings, high and low, same thing. Like,
Yeah.
Like I started crying in my car for no reason. Like I was like, what the fuck is going on? And I remember driving home one day and telling my ex, I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna drive my truck. I can't tell what's happening. But I knew that I couldn't tell really what was happening because I didn't understand. Next thing you know, it just led to me feeling voices and seeing things that I'd not seen before. And then from there, it was like cat was out the bag. I was like, oh, damn. I couldn't, because then I was with my family 21 years. So they're asking me, what are you seeing? What's happening? And I'm telling them because I feel safe.
Yeah.
But I wasn't safe because it sounded like crazy. And so the more I said to them, the further away it put me from them.
Yeah, yeah.
And still to this day, my family still is, convinced that, I might have made choices that because where I'm at now, due to my spiritual, I don't know how you call it. It's just different with all four of my kids. They still really believe that something's wrong with me. Still, and I feel that
something's wrong with you according to like in relation to them, but something's wrong with them in relation to you.
But I think that's society.
Yeah, totally.
Like I don't look at it as any. I think it'd be more acceptable. They wouldn't be looking at me like I'm strange or the things I'm able to do or whatever it may be. But I do believe that there's a lot of things that people don't realize that with this instrument and this other realm of possibilities that go on, that there is superpowers and things that come with it, but come completely.
Yeah, when I look back at what had happened to me, I mean, like ultimately you look back and you're happy that it happened and there's, nothing, everything worked out for the way it was supposed to work out, right? Like there's no regrets. But at the same time, if I could give to other people, I wish to give other people a more stable path of going through that. And I think you're saying the same thing. It's like if I saw somebody that was younger than me going through it the way I had to go through it, because it was funny and silly, but it got really scary and very lonely. And I made some bad decisions and I ruined some relationships that I wish I didn't ruin. And if somebody would have said, like you're saying, this is okay, and taught me how to keep my life stable so that I could go really high and integrate it easily, then I would have preferred that, and I would want to give that to somebody else, to hold their hand along the way on all levels. Make sense?
Well, I think that's what you created with the VR experience that you started was that you wanted to put in effect. Like I want to put something together that I could do that will help people with what it is versus being on stage and saying something that I know that may not, because then you'd be disconnected. You're looking like I need to be of service in some way. That's where it changes, and then
I went into VR because I couldn't do stand-up anymore, and I still wanted to stay in that space. And like you're saying, how do I serve while still staying in that space?
Exactly.
And VR is fully immersive. It puts you in a flow state almost immediately, and there's a dissociated mind. So what are you planting in it? So it's kind of the reverse of what happened to me on stage. I was like, okay, if I've planted all these terrible seeds for 10 years on stage, then I could plant this Jesus seed, just his words, nothing else, and into people's minds. I don't even want to say it like that, but if I'm going to plant any seeds, this is the wonderful one.
And how do you see that working for people with using that technology?
I think it's the same as spirituality. Like, as much as you allow yourself to be receptive, as much as you believe when you enter in the world, as much as, I don't know if I said this, as much as you want to receive, you can get that, because it creates an isolation with whatever type of content you're going to integrate with, right? So if you're going to put yourself in a world with the words of Jesus, and you're going to allow yourself to take that in an environment that feels safe, then you're gonna grow from that. It's like a six-dimensional Bible that you could see. So there's a more of a sense of believing. Right. Then also, if you allow yourself to be receptive in that space, you could go even deeper or higher, or however you say that. So I think VR is really powerful in that way.
I do too. I really believe that VR sound healing with a lot of these, a lot of the technology that's here, and with some, ancient wisdom with future technology, we could create applications and type applications that you've created that could help people with PTSD or that are having breakdowns.
100%. Like, VR is the capability, even in his presence that I built, it has the capability to bring somebody's heart rate down and have their lung capacity be even with their heart rate, right? So if we can do that, paralleling all religions, this is how I would want to do it. All religions that are paralleling, saying that they're the same thing, that everybody is bringing you to a state of peace, then I believe that there could be a real unity with not only people's understandings, but with their hearts, right? And so if you put, I don't know, 100 people in a room that were all having this same experience, and they took the headsets off, and they're looking at all of these people that look completely different, but they all said and felt the same thing at the same time, I believe it would remove all sorts of barriers, all sorts of social stigmas, be it religious, psychological,
it is
sexuality, all of it, because it's, what we're talking about. It's like we're love, we're spirit, we're invisible.
And that's what you're saying, really, is having, if everybody, when you come together, everybody has a complete open and trust and love for one another. When you're setting a container or anything you're doing, when you have that with people, with that understanding, with anybody, they say a healer. If you're truly healing, I feel that you want to be able to talk to somebody, look into their eyes. It's really opening their heart. But their heart has to be open to doing that and trust you. So I believe that technology is helpful. And the number one way I feel of bridging for Western medicine is for them to identify that with the heart and really understand the heart as much as they do the brain.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It has to be your heart and the thought.
Your thought is the mind, but then now you have emotions is your body. So and how do you have to bridge that? Because when people are having these breakdowns, they're just going straight to the mind, and they're not going to the heart. And that's where you lose people, because you have to really be in the heart space, and they need to trust you, because it's a really scary place to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah.
I tend to see them as one, and so to be able to merge that together can be really powerful. I think people would heal it at an exponential rate if modern day Western medicine would do that. But that would take a lot of money out of a lot of pockets.
I think it is, but I think that there's so many people like Kanye West, Jim Carrey. There's so many people that have money and influence that can help get this done. And it's really raising money, like for it could be any different nonprofit. There's a bunch of different people that are going through and having these awakenings. So what we need to do is bring awareness to it, so that if we go to a hospital, that they understand the symptoms of an awakening as they would a bipolar disorder, but be able to identify it.
This is why I think
psychosis, it's because if you can't do that, if you really think about that, that means that any time that we have one of these experiences, what's going to happen is we're going to go to a hospital, and from that point we're going to end up in a mental institution unless we take the medication. If they can calm us down with some medication, it's going to end up going to a psychiatrist, because that's just where you're going to go, because they go to your mind, your head. So until they understand your heart, what you're actually going through, so that you go, this is what I'm feeling, they go straight to the head. Oh, he's lost his mind. So we could raise money and get other people with influence to do this, to do trials at universities, so that we can show people that are having what they would say a bipolar experience and or breakdown, that they could be having an awakening.
Yeah. I'm realizing now in hearing you speak, it's that when I'm talking about stability, it's peace in your heart.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. I didn't have that when I went through it. And so if you have peace in your heart, you're stable in your bloodstream, right? You're stable, your heart rate is low, your body is cool, so you could take in information and understand it in a way that's safe and relatable with other people, no matter where they're at.
There's a lot of other people I don't feel are maybe as durable as you. And I felt that you had to kind of go through this and be durable for this to kind of put these things together to help other people to navigate, maybe?
Yeah, this is what I was saying too about like it happened for a reason and I'm glad. And if that means that my purpose is to help people go through this in a way that feels safer, then I definitely feel like I'm living out my life in the right way.
The story, firsthand knowledge. I mean, if you were to tell somebody else, I'd be like, oh wow, that's for real. You
What?
created a story about Jesus,
Oh.
and then it happened. I thought it was Jesus. It happened.
It happened. Well, just for the sake of we're being recorded, I just want to say that I don't believe that I'm Jesus.
Oh, come on.
I don't believe that I'm Jesus. I do believe that there's a consciousness which is called Christ here that was awakened from my cells and allowed me to have understanding. It's a big thing to say, even in a joke.
No, it is. I was outside. I was talking to Travis. I go, you know who I want to get?
Yeah.
I want to get the guy the guy that I see walking down PCH like carrying a crucifix, and then get him after he comes through that, if he could pull it together and say like, what were you thinking?
That's what I mean. You got to
Right?
pull it together. You
Right?
got to be
Right.
able to integrate.
So that guy just didn't put. There's a lot of people that think they're Jesus Christ. There are millions of people walking around with this energy, and you know.
It is Jesus Christ, though.
It
it's
is.
His, yeah.
It's his energy. It's
His energy and it's his consciousness. So you are. That's true.
You
when
walk
you say
around.
that.
I know. I did the same thing, and not knowing. I told people, like a lot of people.
I was wearing a sweater. I was wearing a sweater that looked like Jesus.
Oh, do you understand? I started doing the same thing. I'd wear white around. I actually would put towels on the floor at my house, like white towels, because I didn't think I would touch the floor because there was sin on it. So my kids were like watching this happen, like going like, wow. But I was convinced because of the images I was seeing that were so real to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, they're like, well, what are they saying to you? And I would tell them. And then I was getting set up, or I was setting myself up. Because then the more that I would say, the more it made me look crazy. And then the more I was trying not to look crazy, then it was like a tug of war of like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more I tried not to look crazy, the more crazy I looked.
Yeah.
And that's another. This is now you're like, oh damn. And then you're in a mental institution. You're like, and then you're telling them. So you have voices. You can hear voices. And you're like, wow, this is actually really happening right now before my very eyes.
Okay, I wrote at the end of that script. I wrote that I ended up in a mental institution, and that was like my crucifixion overcoming moment, right?
Right.
And so in it, they were trying to like brainwash me into staying and trying to show me that I was crazy. And I was just like, I call it the Jesus microphone drop. When you're just using wisdom, you're just like, you can't say anything about it. So I was just Jesus microphone and dropping everywhere, right? And they couldn't get me. And so, but I ended up spending one day in the mental institution because I was trying to get drugs. Because
Right.
I had already been like really high and then hit super low and for a while, and I couldn't get back up. And so I spent like 3 years high, just in a manic state.
But were you taking stuff too? Were you taking
No,
drugs? You
just
never
meditation.
blow, you weren't doing.
Oh, I did that stuff before. Like, I did a lot of LSD in my teenage years, and then I smoked some weed.
But when you were in the thing, when you ended up in the mental institution, did you were going there for drugs?
I was going there to get Valium. And so, and I couldn't find a doctor that would see me.
You couldn't find on the street. You couldn't get a Valium.
No, I didn't know anybody. I was in isolation for like 3 years, and I didn't know anybody that could get me that. And nor did I want to call anybody to tell them that I needed it, because I was ashamed of a lot of the choices I made. So I needed Valium like then, and
So I get it. So yeah.
somebody told me, if you go to the hospital and say you feel suicidal, which I was feeling really bad, you can get seen quickly, and they'll bring you upstairs to the mental institution, but you could leave. So I was like, perfect plan. I'll totally say that. Get some, Valium and leave. But when I got there, they like to have people pay for the overnight stay. I think VR is super powerful for people to, A, to have a spiritual awakening if they want, B, to be able to relieve themselves from any kind of anxiety, stress, or depression that's caused by a lack of peace. Because ultimately I see everything as either you have peace or you don't have peace. If you have peace, then you're not stressed, you're not in your memories that are creating horrible emotions for you, you're not in the future creating anxiety for you, you're in the present and you're feeling good, and peace is the first experience with God.
And that's, I think, with AA, I think when they say taking your inventory, your moral inventory, I think that's very similar to like when you're having an awakening, you not knowing it, you'll have to deal with that. And not knowing that you're dealing with those emotions, when they come up like that, they'll start to jar you, make you feel like you're having a breakdown. That's
I believe that those 12 steps are created, I believe that they're the process of self-realization. That's why I feel like I've never been in AA, but I understand them really well because I understand the process of self-realization. And what I love about those steps is they all have these themes of tools that you could use to overcome the obstacles to get you back to peace. So like the surrendering, if you have to, or what's the first step? It's admitting that you have a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't admit that you have an issue, you can't get over it. So once you admit it to yourself, you shatter the assumption, you feel a sense of peace, and then you could move forward to surrendering to that idea or surrendering to the higher power, whatever it is that you have to let go. Right? So then you can't do the surrender, and then finally when you surrender, you get to a state of peace, and then it comes back to the next step. So as far as any kind of recovery, be it spiritual, mental, emotional, as long as you could get somebody to a state of peace, they could think clearly and integrate. And so
I think that what you just said is the key part of it, and that's the trust and getting to their heart.
Yeah.
That's peace, because if you're just going to talk about, them having an experience and they're having a breakdown and they're mentally ill, you're going to close somebody's heart. Right there, I don't want to hear they're mentally ill.
This is why I love you. And I know I don't know you a long time, but I have enjoyed every conversation you and I have ever had, because I always feel like we're saying the same exact thing. And then when we get to that point, I feel a state of peace. Right. Like, I love the fact that I've been talking about getting to a state of peace with VR, and you were explaining that to me with getting in somebody's heart so you could heal them.
Right.
It's just what modality are you using?
Exactly. We're talking about parallel things. That's what we're talking, and how to use these modalities and this, like I said, this ancient wisdom with future technology to help people, to guide them in having these experiences. And I think using these technologies with the heart, having a better understanding of the heart.
Yeah. So I think being able to use, when you say ancient wisdom, even from the invisible aspect of it, so it's like sounds, frequencies, astral sounds, to use the inner workings of the human experience in the back end of a VR experience and molding them together when somebody is in a state of flow is super powerful.
Right.
And then to your point of trust and the open heart, that's why I like to use avatars or realized masters, because they're going to develop the instant amount of trust because of the stories you've heard over time. Right? Because if truth is eternal and we've been listening to the story of Jesus forever, it's safe to say the stuff, Buddha, Krishna,
right,
any realized master. So to use that in an environment that that's isolated in the state of flow, if you're receiving, it creates that trust and opens the heart. So in that way, I feel like VR can be super powerful in helping people who have mental conditions, let's say.
Mental conditions, and I think, which everyone does, everyone.
Of course.
And addiction issues. That's why I feel that they're so parallel, because when you have these experiences, for me, I felt now looking back, I was trying to self-medicate myself. You have soccer moms, you never know anything. They're drinking 2 bottles of wine and they're freaking out.
Yeah.
They don't even realize they're having a spiritual experience due to something going on in their life and not knowing how to handle it. And, lo and behold, they'll get led to yoga or something down the line, or, you know what I mean? Like, they get tossed through the ringer of trying to go through their path and learn and getting beat up through the way. You know?
Even when you think of like substance abuse, again, going back to you're just looking for a state of peace. You are running from your problems and not dealing with your obstacles, but you are looking for a state of peace, whether it is a Xanax, some weed, some heroin. Like it just, you chase the dragon, I guess, when you still don't find it, or when you find a little bit but you need more.
Well, it's because, and I go back to the same thing you said, I feel it's because of the place we live in. It's not really conducive to having evolve into a spiritual being. Like so because of that reason, we'll start doing or, medicating ourselves in ways to actually try to bring these things that we are seeing to a place. Like, we see this in movies. People spend all this money on these movies, like some crazy ass shit, Lord of the Rings and some of this wild shit we see.
Yeah.
Now, I watch those movies now. Like I might have 4 kids, I'll watch it before and I'll be like, wow, that's really fantastic shit going on. Now I look at it and I'm like, wow, that shit's for real. Now, that sounds a bit wild, but I don't know have any other way to explain some of the experiences that I've had. But in looking at a lot of the things that you see in movies and, I feel that there's reality to those things completely.
Yeah.
Like Avatar, the movie Avatar. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. That speaks to your spiritual understanding, though, too. Because, and going back to what we were talking about, how there is only one narrative, getting back to God, and how are you doing it according to the incarnation you're in right now and the choices you made. So, like, if you could, there was a time, and that was really startling for me to be able to see that everywhere when I didn't know that that's what I was looking at. Because, you would see your way closer to God through flowers, and then you watch the news and see yourself to saying the same story, but then, or dealing with the same narrative, but in a different story taking you in the opposite direction. And so I didn't understand that, and that made me feel insane. Right. But when somebody can look through all of these narratives and still find the process of seeking God, that's where compassion and forgiveness all live. So that's a beautiful place. And hearing you say that and understanding your measure is beautiful. That's, again, why I love you.
Thank you. I think the other part of it is that me too. My mom was super, holy roller. I went to Catholic schools and stuff like that. But there's a point, I just didn't believe I was a sinner when I was born, and all that Jesus shit and all the crucifixes everywhere. I was just like, I don't know about all that. I just don't know. And so it separated me even more from that, understanding. And so I do feel there's a lot of separation with all the religions. So if you are to go through a spiritual understanding of what, and you're having, it's a really experience with God. It's a union with God. You don't really know how to even identify what that experience is, because now am I bipolar? Now if I start talking about God, I'm going to be like, wait a second, whose God am I talking to? Are you Catholic? It's real confusing for the lanes that have been created for the people that are moving in those lanes. They need to be switched. The lanes need to be switched so that they can navigate properly to get to the right place. Yeah,
that's super important. I had a terrible relationship with the story of Jesus growing up. I grew up Catholic, and I just, like you, it just all seemed like bullshit to me. And I couldn't get on board with anything that had to do with church. We had this conversation.
I think that you trip, because I have a different thing. Like, I'm a little bit more like everybody trips. I'd be like, where was he at? Where'd he go? Nobody knows where he went. Yeah. He disappeared at 14? All of a sudden he busts back out and rolls in on his burrow. Yeah. With all this knowledge and wisdom, sacred knowledge and wisdom. But where was he before? Before Jesus was Jesus, he was a dude that was on a path.
Yeah, and I love that about the story of Jesus, that you watch him go from a man into a divine being on this plane. And that's an important thing that I think people miss, but that's a different conversation. As far as my relationship with that, I had no faith at all before I wrote that pilot. As a matter of fact, I have a tattoo that my comedy friend, Candace Thompson, she put this on me. She got to choose this because I said she needed to deal with judgment. I was like, I guarantee if you stop judging people, it will improve your life. And I guarantee that so much that I'll let you tattoo anything you want to my body. And so she did. And I was like, I had no faith at the time. I was like, I just let it be something that has to do with faith. And so I tattooed this tattoo on my body to try to have faith, as a commitment to faith. So when I wrote that pilot, I believed in nothing. And with Jesus in particular, I couldn't get on board with how is he the only one? How is that possible? How are all the people in China missing out? Like that to me, I couldn't grab onto. And I couldn't grab onto anything that the church said. Like
But
when I
if you
would
think
see,
about it, if you really, no one really missed out. If you think about Jesus, somehow he's managed to, with no way of getting around. He's in
Yeah,
every religion,
totally.
every book, somewhere you see Jesus flowing through with his golden locks.
Totally.
They're actually golden, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Jesus has figured a way. He's in there everywhere.
Of course, I mean, he's Christ. That's
Yeah.
consciousness. That's everywhere in us right now. So like, I didn't realize that then, but I couldn't jump on board with anything priests were saying, or you know.
Oh no, my mom, that was my biggest problem.
Yeah.
You know, the things that priests were doing, I'd be like, yo, Mom, that shit's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't be doing that shit to little kids. Like, and my mom would be like, that's just a few, but I go, nah. I look, she's right. It is just a few, or whatever. But I just go, fuck, I just don't know about all that, you know, suppression. You know, like everybody's, you know, like it seems like it's such control.
I
know a
felt
lot
that
of
way about
those-
the Vatican, because I was like, why can the
Completely.
Pope, why is he the only guy that could talk to God? And if he can, how come he's not teaching anybody? Like, that always blew my mind.
Well, no, because what would happen is, right? What would happen, straight up,
Yeah.
if people saw some experience that I've had, they go, he's exercised that fool.
Yeah.
You start shaking like that, straight up, they're like, oh, it's negative, it's dark, it's, oh, he's got dark entities and beings because he's a blah, blah, blah. Like, they wouldn't know what to do because it's the same thing back, the same way, right? When Jesus, what happened to Jesus is he started telling everybody, you don't need them to talk to God.
Yeah.
You don't need these guys. God talks to us all.
Yeah.
And that's why they pinned his ass up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's the same thing. So you do it now, same thing happens.
You know what I love? That we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing, essentially going, hey, you don't have to do that. You don't have to believe that you're bipolar. You realize that. But now we'll get away with it because people like you, people like me, people like common friends that we know, or people that we know are all doing the same thing at the same time. Like, I don't think there's any mistake that how in alignment we are, both as people and with our projects, that we're essentially doing the exact same thing. We're helping people awaken to the idea that their spirit is attainable in this life. It's, as long as you, for me, it's just a safe way, and if you could do it in a way where your life, like the way I see it is the Beatitudes are the physical aspect of your life, the parables for the most part is your heart space, your astral space, and then the I ams is your consciousness that you get to share. So if Jesus is saying it in this, and all of them do,
Right.
all avatars are doing it in this way. And that's how I built the VR experience. I built it per chakra with the content and the frequency and the vibration all aligning and going up.
Right. And if you, like, listening to you, I'm just kind of listening to what we're saying is ever so interesting. If you're listening, if you found a place and somehow you're listening to this information, because for people that are going through these experiences, I think the more we normalize and talk about it, because people are walking around and be like, I ain't gonna tell anybody I hear voices.
You know what? I want to tell a story that I've never told on camera for sure, but it's something similar to what you're saying, and I would like to have the opportunity to make people feel safe, if that's
yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't share this with you yet. So after I wrote the pilot, and then I thought I was insane for a long time, and I spent a lot of time in solitude, I was also listening to, I had done enough meditation to understand the difference between what was a memory, what was a imagination, where did they come from, and how did I feel them in my mind, and how do I then pay attention to the center of that. Like, I was in that space. I was also hearing, and like when we say we hear voices, I mean, there definitely is a differentiation. I don't know the word right now because I'm pretty high.
To differentiate.
Yep, you have to differentiate between what is coming from your ego and what is coming from your soul. So you have to differentiate these other things that come in words. Let's say that, right?
And they also come too, I feel like, that's where it changed for me, because all of a sudden it came with a feeling. These, what I thought to be thoughts were before, that were usually orchestrated in your mind,
Yeah.
you know, but started to feel like they were a cross between a feeling too, because these thoughts had feeling to them. So my body would feel them, versus before I just would think about things and do them, you know, and then after whatever, depending whatever I got out of it, I'd feel either good because I got what I wanted out of it, or I didn't feel good because I didn't get what I wanted.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so that's kind of how I balanced it. Versus, you know.
I didn't have that kind of balance then. I was all mental, right? I'm a pretty hard space person for the most part, but when it came to my spirituality, I was just mental. Now, when I listen, I only pay attention to the things that I have had a realization that brings me into the mind of realized masters, and I feel a sense of peace. That stuff I act on and I take in. If I don't get those cues, then I just kind of brush it off for me to feel safe.
Right.
But at this time, I didn't have that kind of skill set. And going back to helping other people get through spiritual awakenings, if I could look at myself in the past and hug myself and give me that tool, man, I wish I could. And
Right.
if you're like you're saying, if there's these kids or even adults that go through this, because nobody wants to help adults because they're already adults, and you're just like, get your shit together, and you lose your mind, and you're like, well, I'm still an adult, but somebody please teach me the spiritual technique.
Right.
So yeah, I would want to hug anybody that I see myself in, or anybody really that was going through something like that. Anyway, so
through your experience, to cut you off, but
yeah.
Just through your experience and what you've created with this application, for people having these experiences is important, even with the addiction part of it, and how you were able to understand looking at the 12-step program, because it's pretty spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's the blueprint for it's a spiritual understanding of, obviously a higher source than yourself. But I believe the parallels between these two are things that, like, I think that if you go to probably 95% of people that are diagnosed with bipolar disorder, they've dealt with addiction, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You can do the numbers,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then if you go and you look at the symptoms of bipolar disorder or even schizophrenia, like, go look at schizophrenia. It's exactly what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I was having straight up visions of things that were happening, that were not happening, highs and lows.
Mm-hmm.
I was crying, not crying.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah.
Like,
what it really is extending wisdom, because it's really like you're getting information, but how are you handling it, and how are you integrating it and using it?
you have to, if someone's having those right off the bat, it's trust. If somebody thinks that they're really seeing that. Now imagine this right now. I really saw those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, if I start to think because I really saw those that I'm really crazy, I'm not fucking gonna say I'm really crazy, because now I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna take this, because now if I take this medicine, they're saying that won't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have to start lying to them and say it's gone, it's not happening anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried kind of doing that, but it was still there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no kind of like, once you're kind of like in a situation, like once you say it, you're in it.
Yeah. All right. So I definitely want to tell this story now because it's very indicative to what you just said. So at the time, I was listening in a way that it wasn't as I didn't have the tools that I have now, but I was listening to, I don't want to say voices, but there were things happening which I was listening to.
Right.
And I was being very obedient to those things when they led me to God. So I was super obedient at the time, but I was spending a lot of time by myself. And I was on a beach in Michigan, and I was waking up at 5 a.m. But I was in a manic state, but I was waking up at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning, and I was reading Revelations every day because I wanted to understand what that meant.
And let's just say, moving forward, the voices are inner self.
Okay.
Because a lot of things, I think, by straightening out some of the vocabulary, when even people are talking to other people, that would have, now at that point, they would say, wait a second, how would I say that? Because inner self is saying voices. It tends to mean there's more than one person in there. Inner self is, you're dealing with yourself. So I just think for the people, like if for a psychiatrist, it's like, I don't know.
I understand the desire to want to be safe with saying that, because you don't. That's why I was saying things are happening and I was listening to them, because you want to be careful with what that is.
I got it. I get it.
Like my inner self for me, like I don't define inner self like that.
No, you can't. But I'm just saying to save it for someone. I'm saying for anyone listening.
Yeah.
If you're ever in a position and you have a doctor asking you, I would say inner self. The voices thing is going to get you deeper into a fucking hole.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm telling you straight up, you will go deeper.
Yeah, that could get you hospitalized.
That's it.
Yeah,
the
for
voices,
sure.
Trust me, that's right there. They're like, so tell us what you said the voices. And I go, well, that voices, are they telling you to hurt people? I'm like, oh, shit. No, it's not like that. So as soon as voice, I'm in a mental institution.
Yo, you don't say
I'm
any of
talking
that.
voices. No, but I wanted to get out. But
Yeah.
the more I tried to explain it, the deeper I got. Now I'm like straight one flew over the cuckoo's nest, and I'm having a full-blown awakening. I have my best friend talking to me. And I'm like, wait, this isn't fun. There's no way this is happening, right? This is really happening.
Yeah.
The same way it happened with you.
I said that same exact thing.
Like it's the same story, just flipped. I'm telling you,
Are we
it's the same
doing
shit,
this?
flipped.
I thought I was touching you. Okay.
Because that's why I thought it was so hilarious that you created a story of Jesus. I was telling everyone it was Jesus. People were like, there's a friend of mine that's here that worked, and I was still telling people because I couldn't gauge what was happening.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand, and ego wants to run with it.
I mean, I've had a few people that I put on the side go, I think I'm Jesus. Like, I have had that happen a few times. And they're still out there probably talking about it. The hospitalization for me was easier because I had wrote it so many times. And, you know, I was cool as shit when I wrote it.
Right.
But when I was in there, I wasn't as cool. But I was like, I'm not going to let that happen to me. If I know anything, I know I have to, like, come and go and keep my mouth shut. And I thought I was, like I said, I went in just to get some meds, and I asked for them, and they said, you have to wait to see the doctor. And I was like, they were like, go back to your room. And I was in my room in a robe, and I remember, like, you know, plastic furniture, plastic twin bed that you could hear the plastic on when you sat, this big window that was also plastic. And I remember looking at it, and I was like, what happened to me? This is not my life. Like, I'm leaving now. I go out to go, let me see that doctor, I want to leave. And they go, oh, he left for the day. And I was like, well, I got to go. Can I have my shoes?
Tomorrow 4.
You can't leave until you see the doctor. I was like, I was told I could leave. No, you have to stay all night. So then I was like, then I'm pacing and angry, and I'm like, you can't be this way, right?
Yeah.
So then they give me some drugs.
I feel like a caged animal.
Oh, my God. And it's not a place to get healthy at all.
No, it's not conducive to having an awakening.
Well, so I came out saying that. So they give me some drugs because I figured, let me wait this out. I'll sleep. Give me some Ativan or something. I'll sleep this out and fine. I'll pay the bill. So I take some medicine and I come back out, but now I'm like kind of wonky, right? And I'm saying things like, who heals in a place like this? Have you seen the lighting? Like I start just really riffing on everything. And so then I'm in the hallway, and there's like a lady that comes out. I don't know what her job was, but she was like a nurse. And I come out, I'm like doing crowd work with her. And I'm like, hey, so you like what you do? And she's like, if you don't stop, we're going to give you a 5150 and you have to stay for a week. And I was like, wow, this is how it works around here. Like, you put me on meds. Yeah. I'm having fun now because I know I have to stay here one night. Now you're threatening me and saying that I'm crazy because I don't want to be here and I'm on medicine. I mean, it's kind of serious too.
So that's what happens to everybody there. Exactly that thing is trying to rationalize and realize a situation when it feels very not controlled, and you start to try to make sense of something. Because that's what happened to me. I got 5150'd, and it just got worse. And 5150 turned into a 5250. And then all of a sudden you're seeing all these people that are obviously having breakdowns and not breakthroughs. And look, yeah, maybe some of these people needed to be there because they could be dangerous to themselves or somebody else. But there was a lot of people there that were not. They're mostly homeless people that probably ended up not having a place to go, and ended up there. And you start down and you start talking to them, and you're like, this is a trip. A lot of these people are just having like spiritual experiences, you know. And then when you think about it, right? So if you start to think you're Jesus, right? First thing's going to happen is you go, okay, tell us what you're feeling. Well, I feel like Jesus. Oh, you do. Tell us about this. Well, as soon as you do that, they're going to give you a medication, and they're going to talk to whoever is your next of kin or whoever else is their person, and goes, tell us when he talks about Jesus. So you're never supposed to talk about it ever again. If you did, you'd be like, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, they like stick on a whole new paradigm on you.
So you have to, so right there is a problem. If somebody's having these experiences, it has to be normalized to where like, oh yeah, okay, cool, all right. I don't want to feel that if I think that I have these experiences of Jesus and I'm losing my mind and I'm crazy and I'm a sinner and blah and all the different things that have been cast upon people over the years.
Know. It'd be so nice to be like, okay, you're not Jesus, but you have a consciousness that's awakening right now, so just switch the ego a little bit and you'll be in good company, you know, and just ride this wave out and learn how to forgive with the stuff that you're looking at and you're hearing, and be compassionate because not everybody sees what you're doing, you know, and then spread it when you can. Like there's the lesson.
There's a way of coming, I think, off of that. That's such a high, like a big energy, and it's real. You know, I was telling Eddie, I think I was last interview, and I was like, I just kind of came through the door. I felt the energy, and I was like, like I said, there's a guy that carries the cross down the street. I'm like, wow, that guy has some Christ energy. He's just got to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
You got the other guy that's singing, talking to Jesus, probably went to Harvard and gave everything away. You know, that's his portion. He thinks he's having his relationship with Jesus and he can't figure it out.
When I saw Jim Carrey, they thought that he lost it. I knew exactly what he had gone through because I had gone through it a couple years before. But
Yeah.
like, when all of a sudden he was saying these things that nobody understood, I was like, oh, he's awakening. And then he did that video saying how much he loved somebody, and they thought he was crazy, and they put it all over the place.
Kanye, there's a lot of people, a lot of comedians, and people, Keanu Reeves, that have had these experiences in front of us. A lot of them that we forgot about, that now are living their life, that now have been able to find ways to transition.
Comedians come through because they love truth.
Justin Bieber.
I didn't see
Oh
that.
yeah, there's so many, but this is what I'm saying. Like these people, and if they're listening, that those are the type of people that could help us get this done and put together these trials at universities so that we can determine when people are having awakenings versus say a bipolar disorder or one of these other diagnoses that they pin on us.
Talk about a safe space you'd have to create too for people to. It couldn't be like I hear you say universities, but it have to be so safe that somebody could feel like they could trust to say these things.
Well, that's different.
Because when you're in a hospital, it's completely different.
No, so that's to get trials done so that we could actually show that people are being wrongly diagnosed with bipolar disorder or just schizophrenia. That's just to show that. There's another whole component to it. It's one of the best things is having each different people come back and be able to navigate, because then we can kind of talk about where we're at, because each of us have had different experiences, and especially with what's going on in the world right now, it's all very interesting.
I didn't find anybody that had an experience like I did until I got to Self-Realization Fellowship. And not everybody had experiences like mine, but they all understood a common language and knew that was going to happen. So I felt immediately safe. Because once that awakening happened for me, I mean, it was funny with the pilot, but then it got very unfunny, where I was saying and seeing things that no one could relate to, and I couldn't relate to the world. So I spent a lot of time in isolation alone, getting information and drawing it out, like diagrams and stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't, everywhere I went, every church leader, every organization, no one knew what I was talking about until I got to SRF, and they were like, oh, that's all the teachings. And I was like, great, at least I'm home.
Right. See, that feels
me.
good.
Yeah, and so that's been super helpful for me. It's given me like a community to feel safe, a language that we trust in truth. So I love all of that.
That's how Kundalini Yoga was for me. It was just a place for me to go, and it felt safe for me. And it really probably saved my life. But
I'd say that about SRF.
yeah. So I think, that's an amazing organization. But I wanted to thank you for coming in, because we'll just keep talking,
Thank you for having me.